You check your banking app. A number glows red. You owe money, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet pressure sets in. A feeling that you belong to someone else until that number turns black again. That feeling is older than the coin in your pocket. Older than the pocket, actually. For roughly 5,000 years, humans have been keeping track of what they owe each other, long before anyone minted a single coin. And the story of how that started isn't what you were taught in school. You probably learned some version of this before money people bartered. You had chickens, your neighbor had shoes, so you traded. Money came along later to make that easier. It's a clean story. It's also, according to the evidence, mostly wrong. In 2011, anthropologist David Graeber published a book called Debt: The First 5,000 Years, built on decades of anthropological fieldwork across cultures with no coinage at all. His central finding was blunt. Nowhere in the historical or anthropological record is there solid evidence of a barter-based economy ever functioning as the origin of trade. What existed instead, almost everywhere researchers looked, was debt. You gave your neighbor a chicken because you knew and they knew that they'd owe you something later. No exchange rate needed. No negotiation over chickens versus shoes. Just the memory of obligation held between two people who expected to keep dealing with each other for years. Memory works fine in a small village. It falls apart the moment a society gets bigger than the people you can personally keep track of. So around 3200 BCE in the Mesopotamian city of Uruk, something happened that changed everything. Archaeologists excavating the region uncovered thousands of small clay tablets, pressed with wedge-shaped marks now known as cuneiform, one of the earliest writing systems ever discovered. Here's the detail that surprises most people. These tablets weren't poetry. They weren't religious texts. The overwhelming majority of the earliest known writing on Earth was accounting, records of grain owed, silver owed, debts logged in clay so a temple administrator didn't have to trust memory alone. Writing, in other words, wasn't invented to tell stories. It was invented to track who owed what to whom. Think about what that actually means. That didn't emerge as a byproduct of civilization. That may have been one of the reasons civilization needed to invent writing in the first place. Once you have debt on this scale, though, you have a new problem. What happens when someone can't pay? In ancient Mesopotamia, the answer could be brutal. A farmer who fell behind on a grain loan to the temple or the palace could lose his land. In the worst cases, he could sell his children or himself into debt bondage to cover what he owed. Multiply that across a population for a few generations of bad harvests, and you get something dangerous, a society where more and more people are enslaved to debt, production collapses, and the whole economic system risks tearing itself apart. Rulers in the region found a repeated solution, one so important it got carved into law. The Code of Hammurabi, a Babylonian legal text from around 1754 BCE, is often remembered today for an eye for an eye. But buried among its 282 laws are specific clauses addressing debt directly, including limits on interest rates and provisions for canceling certain debts under specific conditions. This wasn't a one-time act of mercy. Economic historian Michael Hudson has spent much of his career studying a pattern that repeats across Bronze Age Mesopotamian societies. Periodic royal decrees, sometimes called clean slate proclamations, that wiped out personal debts, freed debt slaves, and returned forfeited land to its original families. Sit with that for a second. Thousands of years before anyone used the word bankruptcy, Mesopotamian rulers had already figured out that debt left unchecked could destroy the very society it was supposed to help run. So they built in a reset button. Now picture the actual moment this system operated in daily life. A farmer walks into the temple storehouse before planting season. He has no seed grain left. The temple administrator measures out a loan enough to plant his fields and presses a record into wet clay. This man owes this much grain repayable after harvest. No coins change hands. No barter happens. Just a number, a name, and a promise carved into something that will outlast both of their memories. That clay tablet is doing something remarkable. It's turning a relationship, a promise between two people, into an object that a third party could later read, verify, and enforce. That's the real invention here. Not money, not trade. A system for making trust portable and provable. Here's the twist most people don't see coming. Money, when it eventually shows up centuries later in the form of stamped metal coins in places like Lydia, wasn't invented to replace debt. It was invented to make debt easier to settle, standardize, and transfer between people who didn't know each other and had no ongoing relationship to rely on. coins let a debt owed to one person get paid off using a token that any stranger would accept. Debt came first. Money was the technology built to serve it, not the other way around. The tools have changed almost beyond recognition since then. The underlying relationship hasn't changed at all. Your student loan is structurally the same idea as that Mesopotamian farmer's grain loan, a promise recorded by an institution to be repaid on a future date with interest attached. Your mortgage traces its logic straight back through thousands of years of recorded obligation. Even something as modern as a credit score is just a formalized numerical version of what a village elder used to hold in memory. How reliably do you pay back what you owe? And that ancient clean slate instinct hasn't disappeared either. It shows up today in bankruptcy law and student loan forgiveness debates and emergency debt relief after natural disasters. Different century, same underlying recognition. Hammurabi's scribes reached a society drowning in unpayable debt, eventually has to choose between collapse and forgiveness. You started this video looking at a red number in a banking app, feeling like debt was a personal, modern kind of pressure. Now you know the fuller story. That number is the latest version of a system your species built 5,000 years ago out of clay memory and the simple human need to keep track of what we owe each other. The red number on your screen and the wedge marks pressed into a Mesopotamian tablet are underneath everything doing the exact same job.